Good morning, everyone. We certainly want to welcome you to another webinar in the series of Pandemic Workforce. We want to thank Denise Tarka with Tarka Consulting and for helping GENEDGE to put this together. And we thank Jeannie Grubbs, the HR Director for GENEDGE, for working with us and getting this put together to get out to the businesses. Thank all of you for logging on and participating in this webinar, and we certainly want to thank Mr. Matt Clarke with Clarke Precision Machining, who is joining us today as well. With that being said, I'll go ahead and hand it off to you, Jeannie, if you want to go ahead and kick things off.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Again, thank you on behalf of GENEDGE. Thank you for joining our fourth and final conversation, continuing the conversation of a pandemic workforce. Some of you have been on our previous webinars. Some of you are new to this. However, those webinars are available if you have missed those 3 previous ones. But this has been 4 months of determining the best way to go forward in a pandemic workforce, how to manage our processes, our people, and our physical distancing and physical challenges that some of our people are facing, both in manufacturing and non-manufacturing work environments, because this has been quite an interesting 7 months that we've all been living through now. So I hope you enjoy today's webinar, and I'm going to turn it over to Denise Tarka.
Jeannie, thank you so much. Good morning and welcome, everyone. I'm excited for today's presentation. This has been truly an evolving process since COVID started in the spring, and I am delighted today because we get to do one more recap for you, and then we get to talk to 2 more employers. And for those of you who have joined us along the way, I think we've had some great content, but we've really had some phenomenal examples from manufacturers in the state of Virginia who are just boots on the ground, doing everything they can creatively, innovatively, in order to continue to grow their businesses and continue to move forward during what has been a truly challenging environment. So let's real quick do the disclaimer. We're going to touch base on some things that are medical and some things that are legal. And this is just a notice to tell you, I'm not a doctor nor a lawyer, and I don't even do real well with Band-Aids. So I think please solicit the appropriate advice from those people at the health, the Department of Health, the CDC, from your legal counsel, GENEDGE. I know there's some wonderful resources that are in the works to continue to support and help employers during this unprecedented time. So let's real quick start to recap what Jeannie had mentioned to us. We have 3 areas that we have focused on over the last 4 months: the physical, the people, and the policies. And I'd like to, as we kind of recap this, tie up some of these areas and then set the stage for where you want to focus in the weeks and months ahead. Under the physical environment, we started way back when in June talking about, what does your physical plant look like? If somebody showed up at your door, what is every place where there's a touch point and a talk point? Where is there a place where somebody can physically contract the virus because they're touching a doorknob or they're touching a piece of equipment or machinery? Where is it that there is a talk point? Is there somebody talking to your receptionist, and therefore could that transmission occur from some kind of a talk point? And I think we'll see today those 2 areas probably have a little more meaning. But as you continue to move forward, keep an eye on the touch points and the talk points. Almost consistently make yourself a guest in your own facility and walk through with the idea that you're looking at it for the first time, and see if there's places where you need to perhaps readdress those 2 areas. People was the second area that we focused on, and it has really been a fascinating study in sociology in one respect to see people's response to this, the way in which employers have responded to their employees, the way in which the universe or the world in general is looking at this. Today, we've got some great information on employee engagement that we're going to share with you. And then lastly, policies. You know, we have lots of policies and governance issues inside our organizations, and we're constantly trying to make sure they're in compliance with the reporting requirements, with the external laws, regulations, emergency standards that have come and gone over these last 4 months. So keeping that framework in place, let's go back to physical environment. And since our last presentation a month ago, the biggest area in physical environment is around phase 3 guidelines, still in effect as of the 1st of this month. The governor said we're staying in phase 3. So for all of you, last time we passed out a wonderful document that had that information. You can get this on the Virginia government's website under Forward Virginia, virginia.gov, and you'll see a link for Forward Virginia. On September, excuse me, on September 10th, the Hampton Roads region had some additional restrictions removed. Their positivity test ratio had dropped, and so the governor removed those additional restrictions that were in place. So otherwise, when it comes to the phase 3 guidelines, we're kind of hanging in the same place. Face masks are mandatory, social distancing, extra cleaning, making sure we have PPE equipment readily available. We had some great ideas. In fact, last month, one of our employers mentioned they made PPE equipment available for their employees to take home. So they used it as a way to show some extra concern for the employees. And again, it helped to keep everyone safe and healthy. The next area that we want to focus on is under people. With regards to people, and actually I want to go back to physical for one moment, because there is something that has come up that we'll talk about, and that is, if you've been watching the news, or if you want to stay happy and not watch the news, you'll notice that in the last week there's been the CDC's recommendation on the aerosol transmission of COVID-19 or of the virus. Their information went up, information came down. It became a question of, you know, what is the real nature of this transmissibility? And as of this morning, the CDC's website states that short-term transmission is possible, just like any other respiratory disease. So like that would correlate it to the flu, that if you're standing near someone and you have influenza and you sneeze, those droplets can aerate and continue to infect someone else. So this brings up some new physical considerations when it comes to the fall, because we're all moving indoors. We've got doors closed, windows closed. For some people, it is the possibilities are increasing filtration on HVAC systems or on heating systems, increasing the filters that are used in those systems can help not only capture any kind of dust or dirt in the air, but it can also help with the flu vaccine, with the other airborne diseases that we will look at this in the fall. So that said, one area with physical you'll want to look at is there any way in which you can make any changes to help with that? Secondly, keep windows and doors open. Now, obviously, it's getting cold, and for those who woke up in the 30s or the 40s one morning last week, I think you want to, I mean, it's a sober reminder that heating is getting turned on and doors and windows are getting shut. So we want to try to, though, wherever possible, keep that airflow moving. And then lastly, when it comes to physical, it's a great time to look at possibly increasing some cleaning, you know, where we may have focused on areas now, you know, the potential is that it's on more surfaces than we think. And again, I want to preface this, and we're going to come back to that CDC slide in a few moments. To stay connected with the CDC, that is a piece of advice that has gone from yes to no back to sort of this week. And so we invite you to really stay on top of that. And in a few moments, I'll show you a quick way in which you can keep yourself informed. So second area, people. and this is some interesting information. We have been watching employee engagement, and we have been watching employee attitudes to this entire encounter. And what we find, this is a tracking, this is from the Gallup organization. And since the year 2000, the Gallup organization has been tracking employee engagement. And they track it based upon the number of, the percent of employees that are truly engaged. And that is defined as really into their position. They feel fulfilled, they're happy, they come to work, they're highly productive. These would be the people that you would probably call your peak performers. They're easy to get along with. They're usually just going with the flow, keeping things moving, good performance. They also tracked those who are actively disengaged. Now, actively disengaged would be our grumpy, always complaining, not interested in doing their job, usually causing some kind of consternation or some kind of disruption in the workplace. They just are miserable, and they don't have any problem showing how miserable they are. So with this particular graph, I want to take you back all the way to the year 2000 when they started. And you'll notice that when we get to the month of May and June, and that's what these numbers here are at the end, we had some of our highest levels of employee engagement. Excuse me, this is in April and May. Highest levels of employee engagement, but at the same time, we also had a drop in those who were actively disengaged. Now, these are the averages across 2,000 plus people who were surveyed. So in this instance, they're saying 36% is engaged, 14% is actively disengaged. Well, the challenge here is that that means there's 50-some% of your workforce that's just showing up and going through the motions. So they're not the peak performers. They're not the ones, you know, that are really dragging the ship down, but they're just showing up and going through the motions. This is truly powerful information for you, because if you have 100 people in your plant working, 50 of them are just going through the motions, 14 of them are dragging the rest of them down, and 36 of them are really, really, really moving and keeping things moving forward. This data, when you dig into the data behind this, what it showed though was that this last area of disengagement, the level at which that showed up the highest was in management and leadership positions. And they attribute some of that to just the challenges of trying to manage and be effective in that role in today's environment. So Jeannie, I'm gonna send this over to you for a moment. I know you have some thoughts on, you know, how do we more effectively manage during this time? Because we know that they're struggling, the leaders and the managers are challenged, and as a result, we're seeing some of the lowest levels of engagement in the tracking history of this metric, and that's 20 years. So that includes the recession in 2008, that includes 9/11, that includes all these other times throughout that 20-year period where we faced national or international events that could be correlated to the equivalent of the pandemic.
Thank you, Denise. I think one of the biggest things, and I have said it on multiple webinars, I will say it again, and I will continue to say it. One of the biggest ways to keep employees engaged is to communicate. And when I say communicate, tell them why we're doing what we're doing. Make them feel a part of it. Get their buy-in. Their buy-in is just as important as senior management buy-in. When you get the grassroots employees engaged and you get their buy-in and you explain to them, because we're all adults, we want to know why we're doing something. That's just human nature. And we've learned that, as you know, that's something that sociologists have studied and learned, that telling people why they're doing something is very important with adult learners. It's very important with adult workers. You know, it's easy to tell your kids because I said so. It's not easy to tell your employees that, because then you don't get their buy-in. But when you tell them why something is important, that makes such a huge difference. when you communicate to them what changes are occurring and what you're seeing and what you're getting from your higher ups or from the market, that makes a difference for them. On our very first webinar, I said that recently I went through a plant shutdown. That's the worst part of HR, having to go through a total plant shutdown and closure is the worst part of being in HR. And the thing that made it easier for everyone was that the company was so transparent. We held communication meetings every 2 to 3 weeks throughout that process. And it was a long process. We had 5 months lead time. We knew we were shutting down. We had 5 months to get there. And yet we continued to have meetings every 2 to 3 weeks, all hands meetings with every employee, so that we could answer their questions and we could help put their minds at ease, because everyone was nervous. And I will always give a shout out to that company for how they handled that, because that made all the difference in the world. And when it came to that last day, there was not a dry eye in the house. And yet everyone felt better about the jobs that they had done and about the future that was facing them, even if it was unknown. And that made such a huge difference. Communication is so key.
Well, and I think, Jeannie, that's what I was just going to say. I think that communication piece, and that is communication of expectations on the job, communication of changes in policy, communication of how to handle certain situations. I think that communication piece, if there's one word that sums up this section on people, it's communication. And we heard that also last time with all 3 of our employers who were saying, this is how we handled training them. This is how we handled explaining the changes in the work processes. The thing that's interesting about this statistic, and in one sense, because we have a lot of people out of work right now, there are people who are like, well, so 50 of my employees aren't all that engaged, but they're hanging on because they have a paycheck. The reality is that in a good economy, in a really strong, solid, no questions asked economy, those 50 people are looking at another job. They're looking for another job. So beyond it being a imperative for that communication now during this situation, it also helps you to make sure that you're shoring up those people who would be turnover. And I know a lot of people who are in certain like machine shops. I know there's places in which certain information is important because they have the collective knowledge of how to produce things or how to machine things. And as a result, to lose that person means a lot of the intellectual capital in your business walks out the door with them. So this engagement, if we walk away today, I would say, you know what, physically, we're pretty much holding still. We've got to look at whatever this fall brings with aerosol. But employee engagement, this has been kind of like the steady red light through all 4 of these. And I invite you to really focus on this area, if no other. One of the things last month, one of the things our employers spoke to was ways in which they helped their employees. And I want to focus on one thing right now. There were some wonderful examples. They would let people take PPE equipment home. They would allow for flexibility in scheduling. They sat down and brought their teams together and said, what is it that we need to do? Some brought in lunch on a regular basis. Others did different activities that were meant to help support, take ease off, take stress off. Some people took a proactive approach and had all the paperwork ready when all the changes were going on last spring. This is one of the things I mentioned last time, was that with influenza season coming, and we're just like a week away from it, many of the communities are hosting free flu vaccines, and this is a resource on the Virginia website under the coronavirus section. You'll see here that there are probably 2 or 3 right at the top, and I pulled this to show you so you can find it look and see if your business is in one of these areas, and then let the employees know that this free vaccine exists, because it's one less thing they have to worry about. And I think right now, if we can do anything that takes away something they're worrying about, it probably helps them with easing some of that stress that ultimately impacts engagement. Jeannie, any other thoughts on the people? I know we wanted to hit this section pretty hard.
I think the other thing too that we need to look at with people is that we have to be understanding of people. Not just communication, that is key, but we also have to be understanding. This is a trying time, and I personally suffer sometimes from COVID burnout. And I think a lot of our people are suffering from that. Their lives have changed. Their lives have turned upside down, not just at work, but at home too. You know, now in the break room, they have to social distance. They can't have as many in the break room, or they can't take breaks all together like they used to. Same thing when you come home. You can't go out to eat because there's only so many people allowed in a restaurant, and there's only so many people allowed at a gathering or whatnot. And that's exhausting. It's exhausting to try to navigate that on a day-to-day basis, both at work and at home. And I think that, you know, when someone, or the schools, you know, the children are back in school, now they're not back in school, they're going virtual. And we need to be understanding about that with our employees. We need to support our employees as much as we can. I'm fortunate, GenEdge will allow me, if I need to bring my stepdaughter into my office one day and put her in a separate room where she can do her schoolwork. I'm fortunate that I have that ability, but a lot of our employees don't. But if we could provide that ability, would that make our employees more productive?
Yeah, definitely. And I think you've just made a perfect example of sometimes they're really easy solutions that make a big difference. And I think that's the part. One of the reports I get on a regular basis talks about what are the latest trends in training in businesses. And it's not only manufacturing, but just collectively. And right now, a lot of employers are looking at resiliency and helping their employees through programs that help build that resiliency, because it is truly an up and down roller coaster, highs and lows environment, which over time is really impacting the mental health and well-being of our workforces. So let's then, on that point, let's move to the last section that I want to touch base with you on, and that's policies and procedures. And these usually were driven by some kind of regulations. We know that right now, the snapshot for Virginia, 142,000 cases, pretty much some improvement over the last week. The positivity test rating has dropped, which is positive. So all in all, we can be saying, you know, positive messages to our employees, not that it's gone away or it's going away, but, you know, we're seeing some collective stability coming out of these statistics. This summary is available to you on your Department of Health website. And it's something I encourage you to keep available, keep information. I actually have a client who is posting these numbers to keep this in front of their employees. And I asked them, I said, well, why do you want to keep posting those numbers? And they said, because we don't want people to miss the bigger picture, that we might be okay here with, you know, the 75 employees we have. They've not had any positive cases. But that doesn't mean that that situation isn't still outside our doors. So they use this as a way to communicate. And I think it's good at any time for us to kind of keep our eye on the snapshot of the bigger picture. The CDC, and I want to talk about this last, because the next point I want to talk to you about, we've got some things hanging out in legislation that are still hanging out. In terms of unemployment compensation, anybody who's been watching the news knows there's still questions going back and forth. Will there be another stimulus? What will it look like with the presidential election? There's some potential for great change in a matter of, you know, just a couple months. The question of the vaccine. That question, one of the things we found in the research with the employees is that now more people than ever are reluctant to have that. In fact, it's in excess of 50%. So, we've got so many things that are out there that are kind of in this hanging place that really staying informed with that is the most important. And last time we talked about Virginia.gov. We talked about the local health department websites. We've sent out a couple resources in the follow-up emails with links to places. If you want any of that information, please reach out. We'll be happy to get that to you. But I wanted most of all to connect you, kind of leave you with the CDC website today, because as I mentioned, like this week, we saw that first it was this, then it was that, now it's this. And if you look, you can get regular updates from the CDC right here. You can also get their RSS feeds if you prefer to get your information that way. In any event, what I recommend you do is really make sure that you're keeping on top of this. And there's so many different places that this information, there's some conflicting sources. So I think the best thing is to try to keep yourself as informed as possible. And I would definitely put the CDC in that list of sites that we've built over the last four weeks. So with that, I think why don't we real quick, Mindy, can we just ask if anyone has any questions that have come in, and are there any questions to that part of the presentation before we get to the real exciting part where we welcome our panelists who will talk with us about their experiences navigating this time?
Yes, Denise, so far we have not had any questions or comments come into the chat.
Okay, so at this moment, I'm going to take a quick second to just do a commercial to everybody who's on the line with us. If you have any specific questions, please go ahead and send them in so that we can make sure we get those answered for you. And Jeannie, anything you want to add real quick before we move to the fun part of the presentation?
No, but I will say that if you have missed our previous presentations, please don't hesitate to go back and look at them. We can send those links to you. They were excellent. They were filled with tons of valuable information, as I know today's will. Denise, just for a note, I'm not sure that Cody is on.
Okay. So Matt, we're going to give you much more time to talk. So it is my honor to welcome Matt Clarke. He is the owner of Clarke Precision Machine, which is a full-service precision machine shop. And he creates products that meet customer specifications. And this is one of the things I love. They reverse engineer, which I think is just a cool technology to be able to build something in reverse in order to create samples for materials, plastics, low and high carbon steel. And we're delighted because Matt also serves on the GENEDGE Board of Trustees. So Matt, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to participate.
Well, can we start out by asking you to tell us a little bit more about your company, the number of employees, what kind of environment? Tell us about it so that we can understand perhaps some of the challenges that you have conquered.
Sure. We're a shop of about 32 employees. We're in Southwest Virginia. We have primarily CNC machining dedicated towards contract manufacturing. That is our core business. In addition, we do some research and development. We do, as you said, reverse engineering of parts to attempt to help improve our customers' efficiencies. And then we still have a section of what might be considered a job shop focused on local maintenance to our manufacturing partners, and sometimes the occasional farmer that needs some help. But we're a result of two companies that were formed in the early 1960s. We've merged them into one, changed the name and rebranded it about 5 years ago. We're fortunate to have kept almost all of the employees from both, and today we have two employees that have worked at the respective previous companies and now ours for more than 40 years. We have a big range in age and talent of our workforce, from new college graduates to I think our oldest employee is 80 years old. So
Oh,
as
wow.
we have navigated the last several months, it's been a bit of a unique challenge to how everybody is, how the stress of the pandemic has affected, the individual employees and their own perspective.
Do you want to offer some additional details on that? Because an 80-year-old, obviously would fall into the higher risk pool.
Absolutely. As this evolved, really, I think it started affecting most of us in mid-March, maybe early April. I have 2 employees that are over 65 and one that was, like I said, that's almost 80. And until we had a better understanding, we asked those 3 employees to stay home. They didn't have an opportunity to work from home. Their roles weren't one that we could do remote working, but we didn't lay them off. We continued to pay their salaries while we got a better understanding of what was happening and how to manage the space that would protect them the most. That lasted until mid-April, maybe the 1st of May. We were able to have everybody back at work. I'm fortunate that my wife is a pharmacist, a doctor of pharmacy, and she was the ringleader in bringing us information and knowledge. And she's also intricate to the company, and she takes care of the HR as well. So we had some really good support there. We, like most, probably didn't have the best second quarter. In fact, it's the worst second quarter that we've had in the history of our business, but we survived it with no layoffs. I want to reiterate some things that I heard earlier. The way that we were able to move through that was through communication. Keeping employees engaged and efficient in the work that we did have for them to do was the biggest challenge. And I think the biggest success we had with that, we're a small town. We have a lot of local restaurants that were struggling. So twice a week on Tuesday and Thursday, we brought lunch in from a local restaurant and had update meetings with the employees on how the company was doing, what the workload was, what they could expect, changes that we were getting and interpreting from the CDC and the governor, and just had a lot of interaction with our employees that we normally wouldn't have had. With that, we were able to do some of the basic things like build stock where we could for customers that we knew would rebound. But we also put together teams of employees to focus on not the immediate, but the future strategy, process improvements. What could we do better? How could we get information out better? And I've always been very transparent with the financial performance of our company because each employee has an impact on that. So without knowing those details, they don't know how it works. So one of the metrics that we followed was efficiency of the jobs that they worked on. And you could clearly see a trend as people saw work lightening up, they would intentionally take longer to do their own task, and being able to inform and engage them that wasn't what was best for them or the company was part of our weekly meetings. But communication in itself, I can't agree more with you guys. Honest communication, how the company is doing, what they can expect, what changes they can expect, how it's going to affect them. Sandra, my wife's the pharmacist, and early on, I thought it was unique and I wasn't quite sure how to take it. But if you guys remember, in March, April, May timeframe, finding basic home necessities like toilet paper and paper towels were a challenge. And so she managed to work with one of our suppliers to bring in cases of those needs and just left them in the break room for any of the employees to take as they needed them. And, I first thought it was a little bit corny, but I didn't realize how big of a impact that actually had on our employees. So we, the key was keeping everybody engaged, keeping everybody talking and working together. And, we've come through that second quarter, fairly well.
So at this time, how would you rate your employee engagement overall? Are you seeing with them focused on that metric that they're more engaged?
I don't know that more or less. We typically would have a monthly, total company meeting, and for the last 5 or 6 months, that's been more of a weekly or even twice weekly meeting. I have a great group. I believe that our numbers of engagement are higher than the national standard on the slide that you show. We certainly have some on both sides, but I would say our employee engagement is as high or higher than it was prior to March.
That's wonderful. And I think that links back to the little things. I think employers sometimes overlook the little things. And when you mentioned those household supplies, the big impact they had on people, bringing the lunches in, it helped the restaurants and it helped your staff. And I think it's those little things that we tend to overlook for big strategy. And sometimes those little things are the ones that are making all the difference. Can you tell me, if I asked you to identify what was your biggest success? Like, you've obviously overcome challenges, the age issue with some of your employees, these supply issues at home. I mean, you've got some great examples of successes in which you looked at the situation, brought them together, and through your clear, concise, and honest communication, really kept everyone together and moving forward. But if you were to be asked, what was your greatest success in this, or what was your team's greatest success? What would you point to?
From a company perspective, not to oversimplify it, but we've never laid off an employee in the history of our company. And being able to say that we made it through the worst quarter that we had ever had without a layoff, for me, out of whether it's personal pride or whatever it may be, from a company's perspective, I think that was, that has to be our biggest success. I think from a team standpoint, I think the biggest success was that I saw the employees working together and respecting each other. One of the challenges as we brought some of our oldest workforce back in, they respected each other's space. They followed the guidelines that Sandra put out to help with the social distancing, and they accepted some of the changes we had to make in their schedules and their break schedules. And they did that without a lot of complaining, and you could see them working together. They knew the company was struggling. They saw the weekly financials that I put together, and they trusted us that we would, that our commitment was to not focus on the short term, but that we were going to take the time for the long-term strategy, and need their help, to make that happen. And I saw that over the last few months more than I ever have in my career.
That's wonderful. I think you've said something that resonated with me on a conversation I had with a HR person. This is a few weeks ago, and she so eloquently said, right now we look at the messaging in the world, and there is this message of disposability, that we have lost all these people to this virus, and some people have just gotten to the point where they've dismissed, well, people are gonna die. And we've had companies that came and they just laid people off. And it was her way more eloquent than I have just said it, was that there is this pervasive feeling for people right now that they're disposable. And I think you've demonstrated in this example, when you really care for your employees and you really feel like they're integral to my company, they're integral to the success of the company, and their lives matter to each other. And you said that so well when you said that they respected each other's space for that social distancing. I think you've shown so clearly that that attitude that people are not disposable or dispensable. We can't just lay them off or dismiss them. And I think what you've shown is that genuine regard and respect and dare I even say love for your fellow brother, which I think is what the companies that are coming through this so strong, even when they're having bad quarters, they are still surviving with that long-term view that you've mentioned. So if we were to ask you to become, you know, the beacon of wisdom, what would you tell the other employers on the line today, the CEOs, the HR people, we even have some economic development people. Tell me, what would you say to them as we look at the fall and we look at what's coming? We still have unknowns. We've got a little more flexibility in some supplies than we did. But we still have businesses that are moving into the fourth quarter, year ends coming. We don't know. We still have a lot of we don't knows. So what wisdom would you offer to those other employers or companies?
I mean, obviously we have to focus on some of the short-term challenges that we have, you know, whether it's the DOL guidelines for how we work or, you know, what our governor mandates. But my recommendation would be not to focus on the short term, but to take the time that you have to focus on your company's long-term strategy and what opportunities this may bring. If you get too caught up in, you know, what's going on today, as you said, we can get COVID burnout pretty easily, whether that's at home or at work. And if you allow that burnout to impact your long-term strategy decisions on what you wanted to be as a company prior to this, I think that's a mistake. I think that you should be focusing hard on the next 3 to 5 years on what the company might be or want to be, and look for opportunities that maybe this is bringing. That is what we have focused on. We partnered with a consulting firm and our management team has been meeting every 2 weeks for the last couple of months, and COVID isn't part of our discussion. You know, our discussion is, you know, where do we want to see our company at the end of 2021 or the end of 2025, and what steps are we going to take through processes or manufacturing? What new markets might make sense? What new markets have been developed because of COVID, and how can we capitalize on that? But I guess in short, my recommendation is don't let the chaos around you affect your long-term strategy and business decisions.
That is some great wisdom and some also very valuable insights to the CEO who's saying, well, how do I keep my managers focused on the future? So thank you for that. Jeannie, do you have any questions that you want to ask Matt?
No, I don't. I think that was your last bit of advice was so key, because I think it is so easy to get caught up in the here and now and stop thinking about where are we going. Eventually, we will come through this. Eventually, and it may be quite some time still, but we have to continue looking beyond this while looking at this.
Yep. And I think that's the best wisdom we can offer to anyone on the call today is there is a day after this, and it's not going to be like a turn the switch off day. And I think these long-term strategies, they keep us out of the day-to-day difficulties of it, because we're focusing on the day when we're going to arrive at that other place. That was very powerful. Thank you, Matt, so much for your contributions. Jeannie, I think we're winding down here.
I think so.
Yeah, this has been a very powerful 4 months because we have walked through some definite structure. We have come up with some wonderful, wonderful insights from our visitors and our panelists. And I think if I could kind of summarize, there's 3 key areas you want to keep your eye on. You want to keep it on that physical, you want to keep it on the people, and you want to keep your eye on the policies and the regulations. And I think, as Matt has said so well, create that eye on the ball with a vision to the future. And I think that's probably the best strategy for bringing everyone through this to a new place that we've yet to imagine, which for manufacturers in some ways, that's the innovative part of what they do. They find a product, or they find a piece of a product, or a part of a product, and they innovate on that. And so inherent in the manufacturing DNA is innovation. And so with innovation in mind, the industry is poised to come through this using that innovation and that goodwill towards its employees. I mean, we've heard some really beautiful things about the way in which these employers have loved and cared for their teams. And every time it's brought them some reward, whether it was an intended or an unintended reward. And so I think it kind of comes down to keep your eye on those 3 areas, continue to be innovative, don't be afraid, be resilient, and most of all, just take care of your people.
Yes, and I believe that Mindy has monitored some questions. I think we have a couple of questions, and Mindy will address those.
Yes, so we had a question come in from Karen. Any tips on how to keep employees motivated to continue wearing masks and doing social distancing because the pandemic is still going on? People seem to be tired of doing all the precautionary stuff, and we're trying to emphasize that we have to keep doing it and can't let our guard down now. Some employees are struggling with this because there is no end in sight.
That is an excellent question. I have heard that locally we have a couple of facilities who have their new t-shirts say 6 feet back on them. And I've also heard that we've had a couple of local companies that have been using like creative contests, like who has the most creative masks. Obviously in keeping with your HR policies about messages that probably don't need to be brought into the workplace, like political or religious, but who has the most creative mask? Because people are getting very creative. I know for my recent milestone birthday, it was a joke that my birthday was in the middle of the pandemic, and when you have a birthday in the middle of a pandemic, your friends do things like give you very interesting masks. And I have one, all of my friends know that I'm a pug lover, so now I have a rainbow pug mask that I wear. But anything like that can make it a little more fun and a little more lighthearted.
Well, and also, Jeannie, along those lines, I had heard of kind of a cool idea. If you remember back when OSHA, we would have those, how many days since we've had a workplace accident contest?
Absolutely.
Well, they ran that same kind of contest and said how many days without a mask in infraction. And so they ended up giving real incentives to the team to really continue to encourage them. And I think, I understand that it's a mandate. And so there is a place where a line has to be drawn. But I think to the extent that we can be creative, compassionate, and come at it from those ways, we will get better results than if we start disciplining someone for not doing something. Now, let me be clear. I still believe discipline exists. But if you're noticing this as a trend in your organization, then instead of disciplining your whole organization, bring your leadership team together and make it a creative solution, strategy, conversation that is more productive. Because I think right now, the discipline, while it's important, and let me again state, we need to be consistent in our policies and procedures. I think right now people are feeling so regulated that if we find fun and creative ways, we probably get further.
I absolutely agree with that. And I know too that over the summer around here, some of the employers were having a difficult time because some of the manufacturing floors were not air conditioned. So it was hot and nobody wanted to wear a mask when they were hot anyway. But that may change as the fall weather changes because they tend to bundle up a little bit more when they're not heated either.
Right.
So hopefully some of that will, but I think making it fun, when you can make it fun for the employees or you can give them a goal.
Yep.
30 days with no mask infractions and you're going to get cookies and milk, or 60 days with no mask infractions and you're going to get cupcakes. They love that stuff. That does so much and it costs so little.
Well, and especially when you put the signs up. I was recently driving and there's one of the states around Virginia has these signs that says, you know, number of days since an accident. And they're big, bright signs on the side of the highway with this illuminated number that, you know, I was driving back and forth, and when I was going up, it was one number, and coming back, oops, they'd had an accident. So I think that kind of, again, visual reinforcement also says what you need it to say without saying, hey, put a mask on. You've just got the goal there in front of them and you keep reinforcing it. So Mindy, what other questions do you have for us?
We have not had any more questions come in at this time.
Okay. All right. So Jeannie, any other last thoughts on your part?
Well, this is going to conclude today's episode. I know that one of the attendees had asked about getting links to those prior episodes. That will be included in your follow-up email, which you will receive, so that you will have those links and you can go back and review those at any time. And we look forward to you going back. We thank you all for being here on behalf of GenEdge. And I really want to thank Denise. Denise has been a rock star to work with for this last 4 months. Mindy has sent this information out to everyone and made sure that we had people here. That has been so key. And our panelists, Matt, today you did a great job. I want to thank you on behalf of GenEdge for being willing to participate and give your valuable information, because you're on the front lines. We are not.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you, Mindy. And thank you, Jeannie. And thank you to everyone who's with us. It's been a great conversation, and I'm sure it will continue in varying ways, and probably well into 2021.
Yes. And if you have any additional questions or any additional feedback that you would like, you can send that to, do you have the final slide?
Oh, yes, I do. there we go. I was done.
Sam Wofford, he's our regional growth manager for our Southwest Virginia region. He kind of headed all of this up and brought us in as partners, and that's his contact information. Always you can visit our website or contact us through our website. So we look forward to hearing from you, and if there's anything we can do for you in the future, please let us know.
Sounds good. Thank you all. Stay safe and be well.
Yes, stay safe and be well.